Okay, so this is your first Adobe Illustrator tutorial. This is the first video tutorial I've ever done, so bear with me if I'm a stuttering idiot. And generally, I hate the sound of my own voice on recordings. So, unlucky for you guys, I'm going to be doing quite a few of these, which means that you got to put up with my annoying voice for 2 years. Yay! Okay, so let's get started. This is Adobe Illustrator's kind of main platform. On the left hand side, similar to Photoshop, you've got some main tools. On the right hand side, you've got kind of more advanced features based on those tools. So once we get using those tools in a bit, you'll probably see kind of more options appearing here. Your main space is in the middle. At the moment, we haven't got a page set up, so let's do that now. So like any software, you want to start a new document. You always go File, New, and this is no exception. So File, New. A new box will appear with loads of different options on. So all we're interested in at the moment is the file size. So as a default, it always goes to A4. Click on that. There's more options underneath. If you want bigger than A3, generally you have to find the dimensions, so that the size of that online, and then you can type that in there if you need to. So if you want to work in A2 or A1 for like a really big project, then that's what you have to do. Orientation, you got portrait or landscape, depending on whether you want it tall and thin or wide. I quite like, when I'm just designing random objects, I quite like to work with it in landscape. But that's my preference. Okay, so clicking OK, you can see your page appear, and yeah, there we go. It's always white. If at any point you want to change the background of the whole thing, you need to just make a big rectangle over the top of it and make it a colour. But we'll go through that in a second. Okay, so just to get started, let's grab the rectangle tool, which is the fourth one down. Yours might look like this. Your toolbar might kind of look like that. And it's only because I've expanded it out a little bit with these little triangles. So there we go. And the same on this side. You can see you've got like a little double triangle there. So you can collapse or expand different objects. You don't have to have all of these open. You can have just specific ones. Problem is, I forget which one of these does what. So that's obviously brushes and colours and gradients, but then I forget what everything else does. So I like to just have it expanded so I can see all the titles. Okay, so what we're going to do first is just really create a simple shape on the page, and that shape is going to be a square. Anything, this is a bit of dialogue and terminology for you. Anything that appears on a page always gets referred to as an object, as opposed to a thing or a shape or that thingy-majiggy with the doodah and the corners. It always gets referred to as an object. It's good to learn the technical terminology for design, because that technical language gets you higher grades on a BTEC. So when we set the assignments in a bit of time, you'll be able to see the grading criteria and realise that the merits and the distinctions on those projects, you have to use technical language to get those higher grades. So just get used to using them. Right, so this object that we've got in the middle of our screen is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4 corner points. In Illustrator, those corner points are called anchors, or anchor points, more importantly. Let's have a zoom in. So because they're made of anchor points, we can manipulate and change the shape of those anchor points to adjust it, so it no longer is a square, and we can turn it into anything we want. There's two main move tools in Illustrator. You've got the main selection tool, which lets you select an object and just move that entire object around. And you've also got the direct selection tool. So they kind of do similar things but different things at the same time. The direct selection tool lets you directly select corner points or anchor points. I think that's why the shortcut for that is A, which is in the brackets there. So if you make a little selection around a corner point, you can actually click and move it and adjust the position of just that corner or anchor point. So that's quite good in design, because it means you can just make your own custom shapes from existing shapes. So there we go. So one at a time you can adjust these anchor points, or if you select two corners at the same time, then you can do it using, you can move them about and adjust it using two anchor points at the same time, which is quite nifty. Okay, makes sense. So main selection tool moves the entire object and resizes the entire object, whereas the direct selection tool lets you directly select individual bits or individual corners and points. Right, so yeah, let's look at the color aspect of it then. So every object that gets made in Illustrator automatically has a fill color, which is the color in the center of the object, and a stroke, which is the outline of the object. Those colors are defined down here, so you can see that the fill at the moment, if we hover over any of these tools, by the way, it tells you what they do. So the fill currently is white, so if I double click on the fill, I can choose whatever color I want. Let's choose a nice matte color instead of neon. Same, likewise with the stroke, I can choose a different color for that. Okay, zoom in to look in. The default for the outline or the stroke is often quite small. So if you have it selected, you can change the size of the stroke up here. So just to change the size of the weight of the stroke, more importantly, you can do it really simply just by selecting it, and then where it says 1 point next to the word stroke, you can up that so it's bigger or smaller. But there are advanced options that I'm going to show you now. Right, so cool. So rather than actually just changing the weight of the font or the size of the font using these selections here, you can actually click on the word stroke, which gives you more advanced options. So it's got weight there, like on this side, but it's also got different options. So you've got corner points. At the moment, the corner points are a mitre join, and all that means is that they're straight, they're angular. If you change them to a round join instead, it just creates a softer edge on the shape. A bevel join kind of creates like a hexagonal effect on the corners. I don't like bevel joins. I very rarely use them, so I generally either use a round one or a mitre for different things. Okay. The next thing underneath there is a line stroke. So let me explain how that works. So can you see that blue line going around the outside of our shape? Well, that blue line is called a path. So technically, none of this color actually exists. All that exists is that blue line, and everything else that kind of wraps around it, like the fill color or the stroke, it's just an effect that's applied to that path. So you can actually, if you want to, get rid of the fill or get rid of the stroke, so you can see it in a bit more detail. So if I get rid of the fill color by selecting the fill color and going down to none, it gets rid of that. And then if I select the stroke and click none again, it gets rid of that. So what you're left with is just the bare bones shape in the form of a path. There's nothing on it. It's literally, that's the maths. That's what the computer works out the shape as. Okay, but obviously if you click off that, it disappears because there's technically nothing there other than a path to add effects to. Right, so let's go back a bit. So because the stroke at the moment is a centered stroke, I'm going back to those options. So it's aligned to the center. All that means is that you get a little bit of stroke on one side of the path, and then you get a little bit on the other side. You've got different options here. So if we go to align stroke to the inside, it will just align the stroke in the middle of the shape, which gives it a different feel. So it's quite nice when you kind of want like a really chunky kind of window shape or something like that. Likewise, you can align that stroke to the outside of it as well. So there we go. So it gives everything just a different kind of weight and a different kind of feel. So this is like the comparisons between them. So that's currently outside. This is inside, and that is going to be centered. So you can see that they're different from each other, and difference is good. Experimentation with slightly different things like this is a good thing in design, because if you don't try something out, you don't know what it's going to look like, and then you haven't kind of explored all possibilities. Okay, so that is the stroke kind of explained. Take that down a little bit. Okay, so like I said before, if you want to get rid of the fill color, you select the fill color once just by clicking it, and then underneath that it says none. So at the moment now we've got a hollow center and then a stroke on the outside. If I decide that I want to go back and I want a fill and not a stroke, I can just flip it with this little swap button, and it swaps back and forth. Okay, let's make that a bit chunkier again. Not that chunky. There we go. Okay, so that's kind of manipulating a shape. Next, I'm going to kind of show you how to add extra points to this shape in order to kind of manipulate it even further. So in order to add anchor points, all of those options are hidden underneath the pen tool. So if you look at the tools down here, a lot of them have got this little triangle next to the tool itself. All that means is it's got advanced options underneath it. So clicking and keeping your finger on the mouse on the pen tool, there we go, you've got more options. So you've got an add anchor point tool, you've got a delete anchor point tool. If we choose the delete anchor point tool and then click on one of these anchor points, you'll see it gets rid of that point and it remaps the shape to the nearest anchor point. It will let me kind of delete another one, but all I'll end up with is a line. Likewise, back to the pen tool, keep my finger on it. I've got my add anchor point tool, so I can now add multiple shapes or multiple anchor points into that path. You always need to make sure you click on the actual blue line, so the path, rather than anywhere on the stroke itself. Cool, so now I've added extra anchor points in, I can go back to my direct selection tool and I can directly select those new points and create another bespoke shape. In this case, it is going to be an arrow. Ta-da! Okay, so a little bit of tweaking gets that arrow kind of balanced right, and then There you go. Makes sense. So pencil plus adds extra points in. The direct selection tool lets you select that anchor point and then move it to wherever you want it to be. Right, so one more thing you notice underneath the pencil, you've got a thing here called Convert Anchor Point Tool. You'll notice at the moment everything's defaulted to be a mitre edge, so everything's kind of got straight edges to it. With the Convert tool, you can click on one of the anchor points and then convert that to a curve instead. So by doing this, you can give the shape a totally different feel and start to add more kind of fluidity into a design. So there we go. So that is the convert tool. There's different ways of converting into a curve. If you didn't want to use that option, you've got the option of selecting an anchor point with the direct selection tool, and at the top here it says convert, so you can convert from a corner point or a mitre to a smooth just by clicking on that, and so on. So let's make a mushroom. Right. So let's look at these corner points then that we've made. So once you've kind of converted something into a corner, if I directly select it with the direct selection tool, you can see these arms here. So these are anchor arms. The wider the arm, so the more further apart they are, the bigger the curve's going to be. The closer they are to each other, the sharper the curve's going to be. So if I grab these two and push them really, really close together, you'll see that the curve now becomes kind of a lot sharper in its form. Likewise, if you take them further apart, they become a lot more a lot bigger. You can do them one at a time, so you can move one so it's kind of quite close to the middle of the anchor point, and one so it's curved, and that kind of creates a straight line to a curved effect. It's worth just playing about with those things and just seeing what kind of shapes you can make out of it. So there we go. So that's the convert tool. Two ways of doing it. What else is on my list? Layering objects. Okay, so let's go back to our shape tool and just make a couple of different squares and put them on top of each other. So how Illustrator works, it works in preference of the order in which you put the objects on there. So you see the last object that I put on there, it appears on top, the second one was in the middle, and the first one is at the back. If I want to experiment with the layer order of that, Illustrator, it kind of has layers, but it also has sub-layers, so layers within layers. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, every time you want to have something that you can move about separately, that has to be on a different layer, kind of like pieces of paper on top of each other. Whereas Illustrator has them, but it also has layers within layers. So at the moment, everything is on layer 1 on this document, but you'll notice that layer 1 actually has sub-layers underneath it. You very rarely have to actually do what I'm doing. You very rarely have to actually go into the layer itself. What you kind of do most of the time is rearrange the order manually by right-clicking on it, arrange, either step back or step forward or bring to front, and then you've got different shortcuts associated with them as well, which so bring to front is control bracket, so you can kind of rearrange the order and kind of change the design like that. So that's kind of the basics of Illustrator. So main move tool moves everything. The direct selection tool lets you directly select individual points. The colours down there, everything can have either a fill and a stroke or variations of the two. And yeah, right click arrange to send things back and forth. Okay, in the next tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to slice objects up. So rather than just having a square here, kind of making a diamond out of it, or kind of cutting kind of circles and other shapes into it and adding shapes together. So that's using a process called Pathfinder, which is a bit tricky, but we'll get there. Okay, so that wasn't too bad. Have a couple of kind of goes through this tutorial. If you get stuck, kind of either ask me for help or kind of just try to figure stuff out. Experimenting with these pieces of software really is the best way to learn the software and be a good graphic designer. Good graphic design or good creative design in general is through experimentation. So the more you experiment, the better you become. And that's it. Okay. Thank you. Bye.